Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Well, this is the Friday, April 11th edition of our video devotionals, and thank you so much for joining us today. I hope your Friday's going well. It is the end of another work week and school week, and then, of course, the weekend, and then, of course, we have Sunday. So hopefully everything go well for you, and hopefully you can be in the house of God this coming Sunday if at all possible. We're going to jump into it kind of quickly today. I've got probably extra things I want to say to you without trying to take too much extra time. So find, if you will, 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 9. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 9. We're going to jump into it. Otherwise, thank you for watching the videos. We appreciate each and every one of you. And, of course, all the acknowledgments, comments, whatever that might be. All right, so I want you to notice here, the setting here is Solomon has had the temple built. And man, it's amazing. When you go back and read the gold and the way it was done and all the different things that were carved and all of that, amazing, amazing, amazing. He has his own house built, other buildings, and it's like no expense was spared. Unbelievable. Then we get down to one of the last things, if not the last thing that was going to go into the temple, and that's the Ark of the Covenant. That's what we're going to start reading here in 1 Kings 8:8. It says, "And they drew out the staves, that the ends of the staves were seen out in the holy place before the oracle, and they were not seen without, and there they are unto this day." Those staves are those like long rods that were placed in the sides of the Ark of the Covenant. They had those rings where they'd run those staves through it, so no one actually touched the Ark of the Covenant, and it was sat down there. All right, notice verse number 9. "There was nothing in the ark save the two tables of stone which Moses put there at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt." So inside of the Ark of the Covenant, that top part was called the mercy seat, and you take that off like a lid, if you please. Inside, there was these two tables, the two tables that Moses had put there at Horeb. So that's a long time ago when it comes to Solomon's day. But there was also two other items that were supposed to be in there that originally were put there. One of those was a pot of manna that was part of that manna that fed the children of Israel for 40 years. God says, I want a pot of manna placed there. That would have been preserved, okay? Then the other thing was Aaron's rod that budded. We won't get in all that story, but that was another another item of the three. We get to Solomon's day, guess what? There's only one thing of those three left, and that's the Word of God. That's what that represents. It's the Word of God. You know, imagine if there was a huge, huge museum that God says, I'm going to preserve some of the things that you have read about in the Bible. Imagine part of something that was maybe in the Garden of Eden. Imagine maybe something from Abraham's day. And then you go forward and maybe something from Egypt and where the children of Israel were. And then imagine maybe God said, here's some shells that were found that we collected that were part of when the children of Israel went through the Red Sea. And going forward, David's sling and different items. You get to the New Testament, all the different things that could have been preserved if God wanted to. Well, you know what? There is something God has preserved, and it's the most important thing. You know what it is? Well, inside that ark, it was the two tables there. Those are the words of God. And God says, guess what I am going to preserve for every generation? You know what it is? It is the Word of God. And I'm so glad about that. I was reading something else today before I saw this and had not really planned on saying anything about it until I read this, and then I'm going to put these together. I was reading a church's statement of faith, okay? And I noticed at the very top, it was like our stand on the Word of God. And I was reading it, and it said that we believe that the Word of God was inspired in the originals. You know what that means? That means that when Moses or David or whoever penned the scriptures, then those scriptures were inspired. But the implication is, but because of a process of time and maybe man's involvement, that we don't really have, that today. Well, I beg to differ. I'm going to be honest with you. I beg to differ. I think just like there was no pot of manna in the Ark of the Covenant. There was no Aaron's rod that budded, but I tell you what was preserved. There was the Word of God. Now those two tables of stone probably don't exist anymore, but that's okay. I'll tell you what does exist, though. We have the words of God. I think, in front of me this Bible right here. And I've got many copies of the Word of God. I can look over here, and there's some that are precious to me, not just because they're the Word of God, but somebody had them before me. and like my mother and so on. And I believe that inside, from cover to cover, in my King James Bible, is what God not only inspired, but he also preserved. And I believe when I read the Bible, I don't believe there's any error. Jesus said to Satan, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded from the mouth of God. That means if Jesus says man lives by that, then we must have every word preserved somewhere. Now this, I happen to speak English. I can't, I believe God has it for every language, but I know this, as I speak English and I have this Bible, I believe God has preserved it. Now we can get into a little sticky situation here, I suppose, and I don't mind saying something about it, but I don't believe everything that's an English translation is the Word of God. In fact, I believe what I have in front of me, the King James Version, is what God preserved for us, and it's good now, because if it was ever the Word of God, then it's still the Word of God. That didn't change. Nothing's improved it, and you can read different translations. They leave out, take out, add to. They do all kinds of things. And you know what? God said, I'll preserve my word. I'll preserve my word. And God has done that. So I believe that. So I'm just saying, thank God that we have something preserved for us, that if I don't get to see a pot of manna, if I don't get to see Aaron's rod that budded, or any other thing that would be a wonderful artifact from history that would say, hey, that's in the Bible. I tell you what I have. I have the Bible. I have the Word of God. So I know we've gone a little extra here, but thank God for the Word of God. Thank God he inspired it. He preserved it. And if your preacher stands up and preaches out of the King James Bible, the authorized version, and it's not just because it's old, it's not just because I grew up with it. I believe if it's the Word of God and God's preserved it, then there you go. Then it is the Word of God, and I have it. So when Solomon placed that Ark of the Covenant, it was placed there very carefully, and inside was those two tables, the Word of God. Then guess what? I have today preserved the Word of God, and I thank God for that, okay? Well, I hope you have a great day, safe day, healthy day, good weekend, all of that. And Lord willing, we'll see you back on Monday. We'll be back using the word gospel again, and that'll be a blessing, I believe, as we look at that all-important word, that all-important message that is found in the Word of God. And thank you for watching.